Wow, this is a big guy. He'll be up here someday. Thank you very much, Carson. Carson Carpenter, thank you.
We are the common cause, we are the common people, and we only put America first. Welcome back to The Common Cause, everybody. My name is Carson Carpenter. Today is Wednesday, June 17th, 2026, and we have a lot going on in the world at the moment right now. As I am speaking, the G7 summit is happening in France, I believe in Evian, France, where the top countries, our top allies in the world, are meeting there to figure out the Iran peace deal, to figure out other diplomatic issues that we're seeing across the world. And the top countries in the G7 are the United Kingdom, Italy, France, the EU, Japan, Canada, and of course the United States. We have a lot to go over with President Trump as well at that meeting, and some of the stuff that he has done has been very questionable. It's been very odd, and it's been very interesting to see the leadership dynamic in the room there. We have a lot of frivolous leaders in that room. We have a lot of weak leaders, but we also have some stronger leaders, and surprisingly, the stronger leaders in the room are women. We have Meloni from Italy in the room, and we also have Japan's female prime minister that is there, and they are becoming the stars of the show. And then we also have the pseudo-dictator Emmanuel Macron, who is leading this meeting for the G7. I believe he is appointed president of the informal group, because many people don't know this, but the G7 summit is an informal meeting of nations that happens, and it rotates between those 7 countries. I'm sure you've seen it in the United States, Canada, and rotating recently with those countries. But the G7 is strategically important, one, for Middle Eastern prosperity, even though Israel isn't there, and Israel tends to not be engaged with a lot of peace deals. They are still the topic of discussion, especially with the Iran war going on. On the first day of the G Summit, Emmanuel Macron was praising President Trump for his resolution of the Iran war in the Middle East. And then you also had Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, stating that he had seen the deal. He didn't want to speak on the length of the deal because a lot of people said it was too short. A lot of people said the deal was only a page and a half. It was a ceasefire at best and wasn't a full resolution to the war. But Mark Carney went on the news and stated that it seemed like a fine peace deal. It seemed like a deal that could lead to a furthering peace in the Middle East. Now, we've let a few days arise since the original breaking of the news, which I believe was on Sunday, and now today's Wednesday, and we really haven't seen a breakthrough with the nuclear negotiations. And that's really what the crux of the war was in Iran, was resolving and ending the nuclear capabilities of the Ayatollah and the Iranian regime. Now, all that we've seen since Sunday is just a little bit of Trump LARP. We haven't necessarily seen a full peaceful resolution, and we'll dive into the specifics of the proposed peace deal that has been leaked to the media from France regarding the G7 summit. Now, this morning, President Trump was late to the meeting at the G7, and he made some very interesting comments when he walked in. The leaders the other day were talking about the UFC fight on the White House lawn. They were chopping it up. They were talking like it was just your group of guys talking about the fight that happened the night before. Yet Trump had flown in 8 hours before and got virtually no sleep. He was wearing the same suit. He looked very musty, a little bit crusty, walking into the conference that first day. And he essentially acted like it. They were doing group photos. He didn't know where to look. He didn't know where to sit. And this morning was a little bit more of the same. We saw Trump wandering around the room. He didn't know exactly where to go until a G7 handler got him and told him where his seat was. And to remedy the moment, President Trump made an extremely funny comment, and I'd like to play the clip for you all to see.
Well, hello.
I'm the boss.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay. Good. Thank you, dear colleagues.
It kind of feels like your friend that lives 2 minutes away from school is going into an important presentation. The teacher's like, hey, you have to present that day of. And he's like, he lives 2 minutes away from school and he still shows up late. And then he walks in the room and they're like, no, sir, you actually have to go over here. No, you're actually the leader of the United States. You have to walk over to your seat and sit down and get the meeting going because everybody has been here waiting for you. And that's just another thing of the Trump syndrome is he's late on purpose to create anticipation. It's a psychological effect to show, like he said, that he is the boss of the room. And so it's really interesting. That's been the dynamic of the entire weekend is Trump has been trying to dominate to assert his status as the leader of the free world. And in a way that has been so extroverted and explicit that we haven't seen in a long time. I remember he would go to the Middle East and it almost felt like he was bowing down to their leaders because they had immense riches. But now when he goes to Europe, he treats them essentially like they're third world nations, and he's going over there and tugging their arms, tugging Bridget Macron's arm, which is not an easy task, by the way. He's a very good and very strong person. But when you talk about Bridget Macron, that whole situation was just a crazy scenario. And it really shows you the type of guy that Emmanuel Macron is, especially because his country is falling apart. His cities are being overran by migrant scum. They are being totally turned upside down. You can't go to Paris without getting mugged, without getting raped if you're a woman there. It's really a sad scenario. And then you walk around the Louvre, you go see the Mona Lisa, and then you walk outside and they're burning half the city down every 3 or 6 months. It's just not a society that's sustainable. And the West is falling, and it's starting in France. So I would hope with this whole entire G7 summit that Trump would stand up to this type of degradation of society that we see in Western Europe. But in fact, we've seen the opposite. We've seen a type of elitism that has been resonant since, I'd say, middle of last year with President Trump. You're seeing him do dinners at the Palace of Versailles with Emmanuel Macron and Bridget, which, by the way, there's speculation that she's a man. Who knows? I mean, I would say she's not the most beautiful female, but also President Trump has called Bridget Macron a beautiful female, yet he calls a lot of other people very ugly people. It makes no sense. And recently, Trump has been falling in love with leaders. It's been a crazy story, but we'll get into that later. Okay, this is a jam-packed show we got for you today. And make sure it says on the bottom ticker here to follow at The Common Cause Show on every platform. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe on this episode on YouTube. And you can listen to anywhere you get your podcasts as well. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even Amazon Music. Okay? I'm not going to judge you, but if you're listening to me on Amazon Music, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for you. It'll get better. Anyway, with this whole G7 summit, we've seen Trump recently make some comments about Israel. We've seen President Trump have a resounding switch in his tune when regarding Israel with this war. And I think he's somebody who's very slow to change his opinion on allies. He's very trusting with people that he believes he should be able to trust in. And finally, that trust is being broken. He's been starting to criticize Israel a lot more recently. He has been a lot more critical of their lack of negotiating power in the Middle East, but also the primary aggression versus these proxy groups and the nation state of Iran as well. And President Trump recently, at a press conference at the G7, literally 5 minutes before the show just started, said this. Let's play the clip.
I'm not saying they shouldn't protect themselves. I'm saying when 2 drones are shot into the desert and drop harmlessly, you don't have to knock down buildings in Beirut. They could behave better. And frankly, they could do a better job. I love them as a partner. They were terrific. But they could do a much better job with Hezbollah. On that, I don't think they're doing well. And I feel very bad for Lebanon. Lebanon's been, it was a great culture. They had the professors, the doctors.
He's talking about the ineffectiveness of the Israeli forces, specifically the IDF, among their government as well, to quash the proxy forces in the region. You see Hezbollah, you see Hamas, you see the Houthis down in Oman and Yemen. You see all of these proxy forces that haven't been eliminated. And that's something we'll talk about towards the end of this episode, is the specifics of the deal for the Iran peace resolution, which would hopefully include these proxies, or a way for these proxies to be phased out, or a continuing resolution with them, not even mentioned once. And so what is that going to resolve in the Middle East? It's only going to resolve more war and more instigation on the part of Israel. And so when you look at Trump's unhappiness with Israel, you have to think back to early last year. You have to think of the situation of Benjamin Netanyahu coming to the White House, getting the red carpet rolled out for him, and then going into the signing room that every diplomat and every foreign leader signs a giant book at the White House to show that they were doing a state visit. And then you see President Trump pushing Netanyahu in, taking control of that situation, taking control of what is his, which is the United States government at this point. And when I say that, I don't mean the United States Congress. I don't mean the United States executive branch. I mean the office of the presidency. And what I mean by that is the office of the presidency is supposed to be the commander-in-chief of the military. But what Israel has tried to conquer, especially Netanyahu, has tried to aim and wiggle his way in, almost similarly to how Vladimir Zelensky was trying to do with Biden, but it didn't necessarily work to the full extent because of President Trump returning to power, was waffling his way in to control the foreign policy apparatus of the United States through pseudo running of the presidency's ambassadorship. And what I mean by that is the presidency has a certain obligation to the rest of the world to be a sort of ambassador to it. And Benjamin Netanyahu has been trying to take over that mantle and control the angle of President Trump in a similar way, like I said, with Vladimir Zelensky, among other leaders, even Emmanuel Macron to an extent. He's really got, in a sense, into Trump's head to think that he's a good leader in Europe, which he's not even close to being. Marine Le Pen should have won that last election in France, and there wouldn't be the burning of Paris, the burning of half their country every 3 or 6 months. And so when you talk about the strife with Israel, it does seem a little manufactured. I can't lie. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I think it's 100% legit. But I also am not going to be like, it's a complete fallacy. It's just a complete no-show. Because Trump is saying this on the world stage at a major conference with some of our top allies, which Israel isn't there, by the way. And so I think it can't be ignored. I think it is going to lead to an interesting end of the summer with the Israeli and Iranian conflict. I think we're going to see a resumption of the war. I believe it's going to be with the proxies in southern Lebanon, but also the Gaza Strip to an extent, even though it's been completely flattened. The Suez Canal is going to get shut down by the Houthis, and the Strait of Hormuz is going to be getting charged tolls by the Iranian regime. That's something that they will not concede. That's something they will never give up. But what they will do, what they will concede, is having access to the flow of oil, but there will be a toll on it. They will have access to the Iranian regime and the extent of it's going to be a very weak pseudo-regime. They will have access to humanitarian aid being pulled from a slush fund from the United States to the tune of $300 billion or even potentially more. The president has tried to dispel that rumor, but the only way that they limit that access is with our allies getting on board with it, which isn't going to happen. Our allies are not going to advocate for the lack of humanitarian aid to the people of Iran. So you're going to really see a type of situation at the end of the summer that is not going to favor America compared to the start of the war, which was total regime change. That's what the true goal of it was. It was not to eliminate the nuclear capabilities. And so I believe by the end of the summer, you're going to continue to see high gas prices. That's not going to be resolved by the midterms. Because if it was truly a priority to be resolved by the midterms, it would have been resolved by January of this year latest. Because that's when domestic issues are polled for the results in an election in November. It's about 10 months out. So if you don't resolve the problem 10 months out from an election, then that result will still be shown in that election in that fall. So it would have had to been resolved by then, and it just wasn't. So we know it wasn't a priority of the administration to end the war immediately, but I would still also say that they are a pro-peace administration, because even though you could argue they fell into the trap of the Iran war, they also want to end it. And they also want to end it in any way possible very quickly, regardless if it's going to affect the midterms. So anyway, we have to talk about the next topic, which I was talking about a little bit earlier, is Trump is falling in love at the G7, but also with some of these other leaders. You had Meloni, a very attractive prime minister from Italy. Look, they're in good hands, okay? I normally wouldn't say that about a woman prime minister. I don't think you'll ever hear me say it again, honestly. But Italy's doing okay for itself. Okay, we'll just put it there. And then the Japan prime minister just loves President Trump. But there is a third option. It's Pride Month. It's June. It's very interesting. And President Trump was saying some very suspect things about the Egyptian president, of all people. And I'd like for you to listen to it and make your own opinion on it.
Mine. From day one, I met him early in the campaign when Crooked Hillary and I were running against each other, right? And I was told that the president of Egypt is here. That was a big deal. It's still a big deal for me to be with the great president of Egypt, but not as big as it used to be before I ran. So he was in a hotel, and I met him, and we fell in love, deeply in love. And he didn't even want to see Hillary. He said, "You're going to win. I don't want to meet her." He said, "You're going to win." He didn't want to see her. Remember that? So we had a good relationship right from the beginning. No, we met. We didn't know each other before that. We had great chemistry, and I stayed twice as long as I was supposed to. Took up her time. And then when it was her time, he didn't want to meet with her. But he did because he's a gentleman, but it lasted about 1 minute.
I love how Trump always makes it about himself, right? He wanted to make sure to mention Hillary. By the way, happened 10 years ago. Okay, let's not forget that. We're in the big 26, Donald. Okay, we're in the big 26. We have to, fast forward. And then he talks about meeting with the Egyptian president, and he fell in love in a hotel lobby. This guy just says anything, and it's honestly hilarious. And if any of me and my friends were president, we would be saying stuff like this, if not a lot worse. Definitely a lot worse, actually. But I would have to say with President Trump, it's really interesting, the flattery, right? Like, imagine you're the Egyptian president, right? You're sitting there, you're this Muslim guy or this brown guy who probably wears one of those Egyptian robes and all this stuff, like one of the pharaohs, and you're just sitting there, and you have President Trump being like, "We fell in love in a hotel lobby. Oh, we fell in love. It was so amazing. He didn't like Hillary because he thought I was way better looking, way better looking." I mean, that's the type of stuff Trump will say to try to get flattery out of these leaders. And imagine you're just the Egyptian president. You have to go back home, right? Which is, the pyramids, essentially. You go back to Cairo, you show up in the pyramids, and you have people outside waiting for you. And you're like, "I got bitched by Donald Trump, and he said I was cute on the world stage." Really? Really? Look, I mean, it works, I guess. I mean, look, I don't think Egypt is going to have any qualms or anything to say about our negotiations, because, I mean, what are they going to do? They have the pyramids, and that's about it. Maybe the Nile River. That's about it there. They also have terrorists. I mean, I'm sure they have terrorists. They're a Muslim nation, so they probably have those there too. And look, I think strengthening the ties with Egypt is actually very beneficial, especially when talking about the Israeli argument. And I don't see a lot of people talk about that. Most people don't talk about that. They talk about Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Syria, but they haven't talked about at all the Egyptian influence. If you go back to the to the 6-Day War back, I believe, in 1967 with Egypt, you had a sense of strength with Egypt and Israel, and they had some beef with each other. And I think there's an angle there that we haven't necessarily hit, and I think Trump is starting to open up because he called the Egyptian president cute. That's basically what it comes down to, everyone, okay? It's not even because, there's a strategic partnership that could get going. I think this is honestly going to start furthering a relationship with ending a lot of the Israeli aggression because he called the Egyptian leader cute. Crazy times we live in, right? Crazy, crazy times. But there was also President Trump saying that Syria should be the negotiating force in Lebanon. He was saying that they were going to be the ones to go in and stop the bombing when a actual terrorist is the president of Syria. Not the best tactic, I would have to say. Look, a lot of the MAGA boomers are going to say trust in Trump. I don't know about this one. I just don't know about this one. Having a actual former ISIS terrorist try to have a peaceful resolution and stopping a group of radical Muslims from destroying Syria, destroying Lebanon, is probably not the best idea. But what do I know? The liberals on TikTok will say I don't have a foreign policy degree, so therefore I'm not valid to talk about it. So anyway, we'll get to the next topic, which is the peace deal, the negotiation of the peace deal and the specifics of the peace deal. There was a leaked memorandum, I believe, that went over the supposed resolutions in the peace deal. It looked about 12 points, a 12-point plan. That's such a Trump thing to do, too. He was probably in the room with like Marco and then a whole bunch of staff and, ambassadors and such. And he was like, let's create a 12-point plan. And they were like, okay, sir. So it's a 12-point plan, and it lays out essentially the stipulations to end the war. Most of them are pertaining to money. Most of them are pertaining to billions and billions of dollars being funneled through humanitarian aid, through rebuilding processes. But the main substance inside of that, or the lack of substance, you could say, is there is no resolution to the Iran nuclear threat, which we were told was the number one reason why we even had to do this operation. It says we will give them 30 days to vacate a lot of their nuclear sites. We will give them 30 days to start moving forces out of the Strait of Hormuz. Not the nuclear sites, sorry. That was me misspeaking there. But with getting forces out of the Strait of Hormuz, and I said 30 days? 30 days is a long time. One, Trump is going to get 2 weeks into it and none of the forces are going to move. And he'll say, okay, we'll give Iran another 2 weeks. And then another 2 weeks will go by and nothing will happen. And he'll give them an extension. And so I think that it has to be a harsher deadline. It has to be 7 days. It has to be, you have to clear the mines in the Strait of Hormuz in 7 days. You have to get all of your cave-dwelling terrorists out of the Strait of Hormuz. And you also have to return your country to a sense of peace and stability once again, which if it's eliminating the Ayatollah, that has to be the case, right? Not to sound like a war hawk, boomer, neoconservative, but if you're going to go full stop with this negotiation of a peace deal, you need it to be a resounding and lastful peace. And that's the only way you get it at this point. It's either you win or lose. It's either you tell Iran, I'm so sorry for bombing the shit out of you, or you leave and go home and only count the losses of 13 service members when it could be 1,300 or 13,000. Because the Iran threat is not just a nuclear threat. It's also a threat to the United States soldiers if we want to get uber aggressive with Israel. Right? We saw it with the bombing of the 7 Gulf nations, of Qatar, of the UAE, of Oman, of Yemen, of Saudi Arabia, of Iraq, of Kuwait, of Bahrain. We saw all of those countries just get slammed with missiles. We saw the Burj Khalifa almost get hit by a missile. Like, think about how crazy that is. You're going to be talking to your grandkids one day, or your kids, and they're going to be like, man, what was one of your craziest moments you ever saw with the United States? One will probably always be COVID. because of the stupid lunacy we saw there. And 2 will probably be, I almost saw a missile hit the Burj Khalifa, 9/11 style. And it's like, that's so crazy to think, because we were that close to seeing a devastation of life that we haven't seen since 9/11. We were that close to seeing a all-out breaking out of war, which would have been Israel's doing. Let's not sugarcoat it. Anybody who goes in public and says Israel had no sense in the operation is lying to you. It was a joint operation. And who do you think was leading it? The United States, who's 3,000 miles away, or Israel, who's about 350 miles from the Iranian mainland? I would say it's probably the second one. And so when you talk about the peace deal details, you have to dive into more of it. The humanitarian aid aspect of it. There's rumored to be a $300 billion slush fund, essentially, available for Iran with humanitarian aid, which, by the way, we didn't even blow up their power plants, which, by the way, we didn't target a lot of civilian infrastructure. And my caveat to that, because somebody's going to say, oh, they bombed a school across from the parliament or the executive palace that was in Tehran. Well, usually, if you're bombing a strategic target and there's a school across the street from the executive palace, which, by the way, that doesn't raise any red flags. That doesn't raise any red flags. Okay. Yes, there are going to be casualties of war. And yes, that wasn't the intended strike. Now, I do say the United States was wrong in saying it was Israel that bombed, or Iran that bombed their own school. In reality, we still don't know the truth of it. They believe it was American missiles, but it could have been Israeli. We don't know because it was a joint operation. So, again, weaving back to the peace deal negotiations, there's also other stipulations of bringing other Gulf nations into the agreement, into the deal. Most of them are the 7 Gulf nations that were bombed in some capacity, which, by the way, I forgot to mention Jordan when I was talking about those Gulf nations. I know they're not necessarily in the Gulf, but you can't underrate Jordan's impact in this whole conflict. And when you look at these Gulf nations, are they really going to want to work with the Iranian regime? But are they also going to want to work with Israel? That's the big question. Is this deal going to get finalized as quickly as President Trump says? I don't believe so. In fact, right before I came on the show, President Trump said, we will sign the deal very soon. We will sign the deal very, very soon. And we've only heard that since May of 2025. Nobody is buying it. We're manipulating oil prices world with the global demand and global supply of oil, raising domestic costs of gas in our nation very, very soon for a year and a month. That is not a recipe for a thriving economy. That is not a recipe for a thriving country. And that's not a recipe for thriving negotiations. And this negotiation, the alleged leak of the 12-point plan, looks like when I would turn in homework and procrastinate and would do the homework in the car on the way to school in the morning. It was like I would half answer a question, and if it was a long form question, I would just riff and try to say whatever. And then in every stipulation of this deal, there's some type of caveat with a time frame. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. There's no action right now. There's no action with the deal at the present time. There's nothing that would be signed in that deal on the first day that would be enacted to resolve any type of peace in the Middle East. And then so you have to ask yourself, President Trump would give a lot of flack to the Obama administration. He would get a lot of flack to every administration that came before him. But would he give the same flack to his own deal when it does necessarily the same thing? Create an action, create chaos, and create a sense of a fake peace in the Middle East? We've seen it before, and we'll most undoubtedly see it again this summer. But look, we can't be black-pilled. We have to have hope, and we have to hope this deal gets resolved before the 250th anniversary of America, or else we might see a repeat of what happened with Operation Epic Fury. We might see more soldiers being put into battle-tested environments. And we might see the American empire not look like an empire any longer. We might see it look like a failed imperialistic challenger to the Middle East that will never fully resolve in a peaceful and civilized society. But anyway, that's the majority of the peace deal. That's a majority of what is going on today, Wednesday, June 17th, 2026. It's been an honor to be with you. I'd like to keep this episode a little bit shorter. We have an amazing guest on Friday's show coming up. We have Jackson Heberlin, who declares himself as a far-right Democrat. Interesting term. I've never heard it before. A far-right Democrat sounds like some type of oxymoron that displays a sense of you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But that wasn't a shot at Jackson. That was just simply my opinion. And we're going to find out on Friday's show if it's true. But anyway, thank you all for watching The Common Cause. This is our 6th episode. We're still learning. We're still getting better. Leave a comment, subscribe, like the video, and listen anywhere you can. Share with anyone you can. And God bless you all. Remember, it's always Jesus first, America only, and this is The Common Cause. Thank you all. God bless you, and have an amazing day. America is compromised. The mainstream media won't even touch certain topics. American churches are being bought out by Israel. Israel-backed PR campaign targets 38 Arizona churches. ICE is being attacked and assaulted in the streets. Man arrested for throwing Molotov cocktails at federal facility in brazen anti-ICE attack. College Republican vice presidents are being shot on college campuses. Alabama's Ella Cook killed in Brown University shooting. This is not an America I know and love, and isn't an America that I want to move into the future with. The American people have an air of grievance. This is your way to express it. We are the common cause, we are the common people, and we only put America first.